ever feel alone in the culture war, or see everything around you crumbling to ashes and dust, and you're kind of tired of it, but you feel like there's no one out there that would support you? Well, I've got 3 sites that actually might change your mind. So first we have MetaPCs. MetaPCs is a fantastic PC making company. They'll have pre-mades, they'll have all sorts of customs that you can make. You can get cases, possibly engravings and all that type of stuff. Like whatever you want, they can get it working for you. And they've got some pretty snazzy stuff. So check out MetaPCs. You can use the Geeks and Gamers code, which is 199, in order to get a percentage off of whatever you want to purchase. Check them out. Another one that's also really good is DEG Mods. DEG Mods and ayakamods, which I will show you in a second, both share a common enemy in Nexus Mods. So if you've ever tried modding a game, Nexus Mods has been more pro-censorship and not allowing you, the gamer, to pick what you want to pick, play what you want to play, and mod your game the way you want to mod your game, because they don't believe you have the right because it might be politically inconvenient for them. So both DEG Mods and Ayaka Mods are both alternatives, and there are others, but these are the 2 main ones that I've heard about that can definitely change your view on who's out there and who's supporting what you yourself are looking for in any type of game or otherwise. Modding sites can be not safe for work, so please use your own discernment and know that you're not alone. There are other people like myself and Geeks and Gamers, Nerdrotic, and the hundreds if not thousands of other channels that are trying to do something good in the YouTube sphere against this pretty nasty counterstroke against us. So check out those 3 sites if you are interested in supporting those that support us. I make no money off of this. This is purely because I support what they do. So have a great day. Welcome, my friends and enemies. Glad you are here. Hopefully this will be a nice and smooth one, but we'll see. There's an article. Who knows? Well, so many of you may be aware of the Capcom fiasco, is the nice way to put it, with their Monster Hunter Wild game. I have had problems with Capcom for a long time, but not for necessarily that reason, mostly because they just never change the font to their games. So their games, even when they're supposed to be modern games, look like they're back in the 40s when games didn't exist. And it throws me off quite a bit because I'm expecting old game for that. But that's a different story for a different time. They don't seem to be improving, let's put it that way. So Monster Hunter Wilds was released, and it was released with, I think it was about, what was it, 1.3, almost 1.4 million players, all-time peak when it came out. And it was big, really big, and it drowned out all this other competition and all the wannabe games like Dragon Age Veilguard and all that stuff that came out at the same time. Just absolutely swamped it. And I was like, oh, this could be fantastic. I'm not particularly a large fan of the Monster Hunter series for a variety of reasons, but it also has to do with Capcom not progressing, but that's a different story. But further analysis of this has shown that there's a little bit more to the story for this game, because while it did peak at 1.3, almost 1.4 players, it's kind of dropped off like a rock, or like a hammer. As fast as it possibly can sink to the bottom of the Meridian Trench, it has done so. It's not at 0 players, but it is nowhere near its all-time peak. So, for example, here we have the SteamDB charts, and as you can see, 1.3, or was it 1,384,608 players 4 months ago when it was released. All 24-hour peak is about 42,000 people roughly, and its current players 18,000. So, what is going on? Because as you can see here, there is a spike of sorts. 133,000 players. That's the high peak. Now keep in mind, 133,000 players is what? I'm bad with math, so I'd say 10%, but that's probably wrong. It's probably horribly wrong, but it's probably 10%. So 10% of their 4 month ago peak. That's not a good drop for a game that's supposed to be consistent. Now, there were things that happened, namely, they had issues with graphics cards and settings on some specs because it would work with some technical specs, but it wouldn't work with others. But from what I can tell, it's about once a month there's a increase that you can see down here. There's usually a little bump and whatnot, but this one I believe in April was a major release. Yeah, it's a major update. Then it bumped back up, and that was up to 500,000. But then it kind of dropped to 220, 209, 99, and then all the way back over here to 133. So it spiked up and then is dropping back down at a pretty incredible rate. Now, obviously, recording this is the middle of the day. People are probably at work or school or whatever the case might be. So 18,000, probably still pretty good for considering how many people are around to play it. 41,000 for 24 hours is pretty rough, though. Yeah. In the last 48 hours, 41,000's the best you're getting in that regard. Now, what can cause problems? So Capcom handling this pretty poorly. And you might ask, how poorly? Very poorly. And the biggest problem, I think, is that they did not optimize the game very well, is one of the big parts. So even for people who have the right hardware or the right brand or whatever the case might be, it's still a bit rough because it wasn't optimized well. It could consume more power than it's necessarily needed to do what it needs to do, and the playing situation may or may not give you graphical glitches. I know people who don't have the right brand did have lots of graphical issues, and it caused even some of the diehard fans that I know to not particularly enjoy their experience with it, despite being massive Monster Hunter fans. And they like Monster Hunter Wilds too. It's just it's not quite the same. It feels different to some extent, aside from the technical issues. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but maybe it might not be their cup of tea. Now, on the flip side, there has been, what I can only say is Capcom being Capcom. So, in this article by PC Gamer, Capcom cancels a presentation on Monster Hunter Wilds performance at CEDEC 2025 amid ongoing developer harassment. Now, Capcom has this huge thing where they're like, oh, you can't harass our developers and blah, 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 blah. Now, first and foremost, you should never harass people. The problem here is that the definition of harassment is targeting somebody specifically and just hammering home at them over and over and over and over again. But that's like one person doing that. At least one person hitting the same person over and over and over again. Now, what do you do when you're a company and that company is a pretty large company, like very, very profitable company, very large, wealthy company, and they do something that people don't like, or they whiff when they should have been hitting it out the ballpark? We would call that failure. However, if you were to call Capcom a failure in this regard of Monster Hunter Wilds, that would be considered harassment, because in their definition, Monster Hunter Wilds is fine. I mean, there were some issues, but they figured it out, guys. It's okay. It's just they optimized it because they couldn't do it beforehand, but they could do it after. And then people saying your people didn't do a good job. You didn't do your due diligence. You're not releasing the game as a full complete package. You're releasing it buggy. Like really buggy. Not like little buggy, really buggy. Well, this rolls out another thing of, okay, does harassment count as, I don't like what you did? No. Now, is it harassment if you make one comment saying this was terrible? Or if you go on a different forums all over the place and like they're not all directed directly at Capcom and you just share your opinion and it wasn't that good, or it should have been optimized better, or whatever the case might be. You would argue typically from a reasonable perspective that that's not harassment. That's you showing as a consumer your displeasure with poor performance of a game, like everybody typically does when they're unhappy with a scenario. Now, if you were to call one of the developers' houses directly, and I would definitely tell you not to do this in any shape or form, because that your Capcom will just come after you. But if you went to their house or called them on the phone over and over again, and you're just harassing that particular developer or any of the developers like that, that's not the same thing as showing your displeasure. That is a very, very different thing. That's way beyond and way too extensive for that. So, if you're wanting to show your displeasure, you go on, you give it a thumbs down or whatever the case might be. So, let's read this. Last week, Capcom issued a statement saying it may pursue legal action in case of severe customer harassment. Now, the idea of this is going to be silly because what is harassment? And I've kind of described it the best I could without going like super crazy into it because that'll make the video longer. But basically, what they think is harassment and what we think is harassment might not be the same thing. Now, there may be people who are a little over the top, and that's who Capcom is going to pursue, and that'll be it. But from what I understand, this is overwhelmingly negative on Steam. And if it's overwhelmingly negative on Steam, it's probably because poor optimization, people didn't have the right specs because they only had it working with one set of graphics cards and not another, or another CPU, not another CPU, that kind of a thing. But if they think harassment is anybody that dislikes their stuff, well, I can pursue legal action because they're harassing me by telling me my game didn't do good. That's not harassment. That's consumers being upset with your product, which is pretty normal, all things considered. So, that being said, Capcom has canceled the developer presentation on performance and optimization in Monster Hunter Wilds that was planned to take place later this month at the 2025 Computer Entertainment Developers Conference, the Japanese equivalent to GDC, which is terrible, by the way. While Capcom hasn't stated a reason behind the change, the lecture's cancellation comes as Monster Hunter Wilds developers face harassment stemming from an ongoing outpouring of negative sentiment about the game's performance issues. According to machine translations at the DEC website, the lecture, titled Making Monster Hunter Wilds Run Smoothly, All About Performance Adjustments, was intended to detail Capcom's many battles to maintain stable operation while realizing the elements that make the game a selling point, with an emphasis on GPU load, CPU load, and memory optimization. Capcom hasn't made an official statement about the reasoning behind the talk's cancellation, but there's more than enough cause to speculate. The overwhelming majority of recent negative Wilds reviews are centered on performance complaints that persist despite texture streaming fixes in the latest title update. That's a while ago. While Capcom says it's committed to continuing performance improvements, it isn't hard to imagine how a talk on making Monster Hunter run smoothly might attract unfriendly attention from the many players who say it doesn't. Because if they're saying, we're doing our best, and the players are like, no, you're not, then you're probably not. Because the people who want to play your game, that bought your game with the promise that they could play your game, and then it's been nothing but a nightmare to play, odds are it's probably a nightmare to play. And that means you didn't do your due diligence before you released the game, and after you did and added a major update, you still didn't do your due diligence. Why is this really profitable, extremely wealthy company having this effect? Because they want to put as little effort into it, apparently. Evidently, Capcom developers have already been suffering abuse from players who've decided that the best response to their justifiable frustration with the game's performance issues is unjustifiable targeted harassment. Evidently. Last week, Capcom published a notice on its Japanese support website saying it has, quote-unquote, confirmed some instances of slander, libel, denigration, intimidation, threats to harm or disrupt business, and harassment against our executives and our employees by name or in a manner that recalls specific individuals. Now, this might be the case, and it may be a few people, because there's always a few people. There's always the extremists in some situation, in some shape or form. But I don't know exactly what they think this means because they're not being clear on it. They're saying we have confirmed some instances of slander. Well, that's just people saying you suck. That's not going to be slander. Libel, denigration, intimidation. What are people saying? Make this work or I'm coming for your family. Again, extremists, not good. Threats to harm or disrupt business. I like how threats to harm is the same as disrupt business, but okay. Are these Japanese players? Are these, obviously they're probably not American players because they're not going to go freaking Japan just to wreck someone's freaking business unless they're an extremist. And harassment against their executives. Well, telling an executive that they suck at their job because, quite frankly, pretty much every single corporation in Japan that deals in video games right now does suck at their job. There's no easy way to put it otherwise because they're not there for the fans. They're there to make the fans pay. There's a very big difference. If you're a game developer or a publisher, you should be going out of your way, bending over backwards to get the fans what they're looking for and to not try to shaft them. In this situation, they could probably clear this largely up by giving out mass refunds. And I mean mass refunds. Yeah, they'll take a hit. That's the point. They're supposed to be punished for bad delivery, bad creation, whatever it might be. They didn't produce the thing they promised they were going to produce. That should be offers of mass. Now, there's going to be people who have had no problems, and they're going to be fine. But if you're talking about 1.3 million people playing your game, and it's now down to 40,000, that's not a good look, guys. That looks terrible. But if you don't care and you just want their money, well, you're not going to offer those refunds because you don't care about the fans. And even if you did offer some refunds, you're canceling these things based off of quote unquote harassment, slander, libel, denigration, intimidation, threats to harm or disrupt business, harassment against their executives and employees by name or in a manner that recalls specific individuals. Receipts? Do you have receipts? Do you have tweets? Do you have letters that somebody sent you? Like, what on earth do you have as actual evidence? Because at this point, I'm more inclined to believe you don't have this evidence and you're just trying to knock down the negative thing. Basically saying if you leave a negative review on our game on Steam, we're going to come after you with a law and call you a harasser, which is obviously not going to work. But Capcom went on to say that it may contact the police or lawyers and take legal action in cases of severe customer harassment, which could include defamation, abusive language, violent acts or threats, or violent threats or acts, violating employee privacy, and other forms of targeted hostility that are as futile as they are indefensible. As ever, if someone's making a living hell for any individual developer, they're more likely terrorizing someone with no influence over the business practices responsible for their complaints. And at the time of writing, the other Monster Hunter Wilds related talks on the EDC schedule are still set to continue. So the one thing that they should be, focusing on, which is, hey, here's how our performance and stuff is going. If they're backing out of that instead of pushing forward, because if you're actually improving on this and you push forward, you should be getting like, hey guys, we're taking care of it. Everything's going to happen. It's going to be great. That'll be a great surge in people wanting to play again. I don't know if people would have a surge of people want to play. There'd probably be a good sized bump up. Maybe a couple 100,000 people want to play again. I don't see that 1.3 coming back. I don't. It's just not. No way. Not going to happen. But you canceling it and claiming it's because of harassment is ridiculous. Because if you show up saying this is what we're doing to fix it and here's what we've done to fix it, either of those things would give you much more grace in the eyes of the consumer. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like that's the position you guys are wanting to take as Capcom, so unfortunately, it's probably going to be less than desirable. So, my particular thoughts on this is that Capcom and I do not have a good relationship. Dragon's Dogma 2 was something I was excited about, and it was kind of less than exciting. I'll put it that way. I kind of regretted it, honestly. Had a cool concept, but there's just something about it that just it didn't fit. And I've even tried to go back and play like the old Soul Calibur games. They use the same stuff for their menus. Like, I'm not even joking. If you go play a Soul Calibur with like Geralt in it, Geralt of Rivia, it's got the same menu as it did freaking in the first Soul Calibur. Like, they don't change anything. There's nothing different and progressive about this company in any shape or form. They don't use a font that follows the game's font. If you have a font like Monster Hunter Wilds and it's got this crazy Monster Hunter type thing, you think that would be the font that no. It's basically Times New Roman every single time. Um, some things, some graphics do upgrade, but the game mechanics don't really upgrade ever. It's it's just a problem I have with them. But in this particular instance, you shouldn't be harassing anybody. You shouldn't be, going extreme on anybody. But you should definitely have the ability to call out a terrible product when it's released, and you should definitely be like, I'm displeased by this lack of a good quality product. And if you did buy it and you are like, I went over the 2 hour mark thinking it was good, or whatever the case might be, or whatever the case happened to you, and you can't get a refund, I'd be like, I'd rather have a refund. And I don't know, I doubt Steam would do it, but maybe Steam would. Um, but if you keep playing, obviously, then you're not going to get one probably. But if that's the case, and Capcom doesn't want to acknowledge anything, then that I have very few good things to say about Capcom, guys. I'm sorry. there's there's not much good I can say about them. So hopefully this will get better, and I hope that the Monster Hunter Wilds fans get a better game out of this, and that it does officially get fixed, and they can enjoy their game. I really hope that happens. I probably am not going to dip my toes into that. I tried the beta because I had some friends that were like, "Hey, let's try it out," and we tried it, and it was just crash, crash. I couldn't get through the first intro video. Like you're in the sands jumping around, and I was just like, "Oh, this is great," and it crashed. And graphical glitch, I can't see anything. Oh, and this, it just over and over and over again. So same issues I had with what is it, Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2. Bestie got me the game. We're gonna play together and everything, and it was a terrible experience. It crashed probably 8, 9 times before I could get in, and I could actually like adjust options and drop them basically to nothingness, and it was still freezing up. But if I did manage to get through the cutscenes, because the cutscenes were what freezing me up, not even the gameplay, just a video, playing a video, a preset video, caused my computer to not like that, and the game would crash. That was sad. But then the controls being horrific. Like, they could have just copied Gears of War and it would have been so much better, but nope, that's not what they did. And I was like, nah, bro, this is bad. And never really got to enjoy it because it was just bad. That might sound like a hot take, but guess what? They don't make games for everybody. They make them for specific people, and they have a specific setup. And when they don't give you the option to like customize your keys, I personally don't enjoy that. But even if that was the case, throwing 1,000 pounds of metal at someone's face ought to kill them unless they're immortal and a god. Sorry, like if I use all my ammunition to kill something and it's not dead at the end of all that ammunition, and I chainsaw them and I punch them, I headbutt them, I bite their nose off with my teeth. I've done more damage with my teeth than I have with any other of my arsenal. That's just my opinion. Poor design for the game. Now, I get that it's supposed to be a crazy over-the-top world, but you still got to be able to kill stuff. I see more deaths in the cutscenes, the videos that you see YouTubers always use when they're talking about Warhammer. There's more deaths in those than I saw in the Space Marines 2 game. That's just embarrassing. But be as it may. If you have to shoot 10 billion bullets and kill maybe 1,000 people, it might be just bad game mechanics. But it's just not for me. I'd rather play Gears of War, personally. But it is what it is. But as for Capcom, don't harass people. I hope it gets better for you, and I hope you have a great day. So, thanks everybody for hanging out, and remember, my friends, walk in the light.